I'm going to just check whether you can all hear me to start with, because I always get told that you can't. But I've been also told that this is like the most expensive microphone ever, so it should be quite good. Can you all hear me okay? So today I'm going to provide you quite a bit of context for what I mean when I talk about radical theology, before suggesting what one of the ways that religion might be understood within this kind of theological tradition. I'm going to start just by introducing myself a bit, because we don't know each other very well yet. I think I'm advertised by the PCN as a leading voice in the UK emerging church. I'm not. I'm more of a researcher looking at emerging Christianity. So I do hope that some of the questions that I raise will be in some way also contribute to the emerging church conversation. But yeah, I also like to start my talks, if some of you have heard me before, I've done this before, I like to start by kind of oversharing at the beginning, so that it kind of offsets the fact that what is about to come next is quite formal and rigid, because that's the kind of idealized self of my presentation of myself that I want to get across to people. So I offset that at the beginning by showing you how much of a mess I am, really. So like I said, I'm not really in this conversation. I'm a researcher. I like researching other people's religious beliefs and practices, because then I don't have to look at what I believe and what I do. I like talking about other philosophers and other theologians, because then I don't really have to think about what I think, because that would involve looking at some of the things that I like to keep repressed. So I'm an academic working at the intersection of philosophy, theology and religious studies. We kind of have to call ourselves independent scholars when we're unemployed, which is what I am right now. But I like to think that keeps Pete humble, because one of the academics that is writing on his work can't get a job. So that's my job, really, to keep Pete a bit humble. I'm also going to be, as I said, sort of reversing the tempo that George brought us before lunch by just being quite like this, rigid, and I've got my pieces of paper here and I'm holding on to them. So I'm working in philosophy, theology and religious studies, and looking at how the relationships between them can sort of be generative, how they can talk to each other and produce something between these different fields. Looking at especially how the impact of theology and philosophy what that might look like on individual and communal life, on sort of everyday discourse or material cultures or social practices. So I'm interested in particularly in looking at how philosophies like deconstruction and materialism don't just influence radical theologies in the academy, but also are inspiring and energizing emerging Christian practices. So my first book, Radical Theology and Emerging Christianity, Deconstruction, Materialism and Religious Practices, will be published next year. My other books, Post-Secular Theology and the Church and A/Theism, I can't tell you how pleased I am with this subtitle. A New Kind of Christian is a New Kind of Atheist. They'll be both out after that. My most recent position was at the University of Liverpool, where I was a research associate on the Philosophy and Religious Practices Research Network. Philosophers have sort of long been accused of a blatant disregard of concrete religious practices, and religious practitioners are often suspicious of philosophy as a kind of rival form of knowledge to their received revelation. So this network was aiming to sort of facilitate collaboration between these two sets of people, philosophers and faith communities. But mainly to sort of see what was the impact and how on earth might we measure the impact between philosophy and religion and philosophy. I'm also co-organise a conference series in the States called Subverting the Norm, which we think the third one will be next October, if anyone can make it to the States for that. It's a very good event. It's unique in bringing religious practitioners and theorists together who are drawn to postmodern or radical theologies to help them reflect on what these approaches to theology might mean for the church, for concrete practice. So when I talk about radical theology, I'm referring to a variety of contemporary theologies with this specific lineage within Western philosophy. So this originates in the 19th century. This was the century in which atheism and religious doubt more generally became this inescapable kind of feature of the cultural landscape. Many of the great atheist critics of Christianity and of Christendom developed their theories of religion in this century. So it was a century in which Nietzsche observed that belief in the God of Christianity became unbelievable. In this century, Freud had linked his theory of dreams as the disguised fulfillment of suppressed wishes to a critique of religion as wish fulfillment. Feuerbach had asserted that religion is the projection of humanity's best attributes, and Marx had therefore argued that the criticism of the heavens, of theology and of religion, should therefore, it had gone as far as it could go and should therefore translate into the criticism of the earth, of law and of politics. So today I'm going to argue that radical theologies are rooted in these materialist critiques of religion proposed by figures like Freud, Marx and Nietzsche, but that radical theologians deploy this critique not really in order to dispose of religion, to dispense with it, but to discover its potential. I want to suggest that radical theologies revolutionise the concept of religion beyond the illusionary escapism that's the target of these critiques. I'm going to propose that religion be understood as a way of reconciling us to our nothingness, and I'll do so by introducing some of the figures that are central to radical theology's philosophical heritage. So Feuerbach asserted that religion is the externalization, objectification or projection of humanity's most admirable qualities. He wrote that what man praises and approves, that is God to him. Man first unconsciously and involuntarily creates God in his own image, and after that it is believed that God consciously and voluntarily creates man in his own image. Feuerbach's identification of anthropology as the secret of theology and his desire to transform the lovers of God into lovers of humanity, this prepared the way for the materialist critique of religion as the alienation of humanity from itself. So for Marx, the critique of religion should go further than this and address the material conditions and real distresses that then require the consolations of religion as this illusionary form of happiness. He wrote that religion is the sigh of the oppressed creature. The abolition of religion as the illusory happiness of the people is required for their real happiness. Religion has this ideological function that disguises the real relationship of individuals to their conditions of existence. It masks a contingent ordering of society that benefits some while oppressing others. For Freud, the individual suffering the religious delusion escapes from the real world to a fantasy in which a better reality may be hallucinated instead. Wishful thinking and a disregard of reality plays a central role in religious belief for Freud. He wrote, "We shall tell ourselves that it would be very nice if there was a God who created the world and was a benevolent providence, and if there were a moral order in the universe and an afterlife. But it is a very striking fact, noteworthy rather than surprising, that all this is exactly as we would wish it to be." For Freud, religion is nothing more than a palliative, which means it relieves the symptoms of what he called our common unhappiness. Don't write that down as a Freudian slip, Pete. It relieves the symptoms of our common unhappiness without curing this condition. Life is terminal. We find it necessary to employ certain consolatory cultural measures, things that console us, in order to endure life. Principally, these are intoxication, so alcohol, drugs, enjoyment of art, sexual love, and religious belief. Religion is one of the auxiliary structures needed to support and strengthen the edifice of our existence. For Nietzsche, God had become a value, a tradition, a custom to obey, an instrument of the human will to power and domination. The idea of the death of this God, proclaimed by the madman in Nietzsche's parable, therefore means the death of any system of truth, meaning, purpose and value, whether conventionally religion or conventionally secular. He wrote that the event of God's death is too great, too remote from the multitude's capacity for comprehension, even for the tiding of it to be thought of having arrived as yet. Do we still hear nothing of the grave diggers who are burying God? Do we still smell nothing of the divine decomposition? Nietzsche's madman announces the impossibility of any God's eye perspective on, transcendent source of, or absolute justification for any universal principle or set of principles, whether provided by reason or revelation. The notion of the death of God is frequently associated with Nietzsche, but it can be traced to the work of Hegel. For him, God is an imaginative, figurative, or pictorial presentation of absolute spirit. Spirit can only be properly conceptualized and clarified by his philosophical system. The world comes to be through the self-abandonment, self-negation, or self-realization of spirit, as it posits itself as other, pours itself out into the world, the other, in order to achieve full knowledge of itself. The world is therefore a manifestation of this unfolding movement of spirit. The world is spirit as it encounters itself as other. So these philosophical truths in Hegel's system about the nature and becoming of absolute spirit are metaphorically represented in Christianity. For Hegel, God is not only dead because God is distant, unknowable and therefore lifeless, but because it's both through a certain death to God's self at the incarnation that the God the Father moves out of this transcendent remoteness to live immanently as God the Son, immanently in the world as God the Son, and through Christ's death at resurrection, at Christ's death at the crucifixion, which is the same thing as the resurrection, by the way, that God the Son is resurrected as God the Holy Ghost, the body of Christ, the community of believers. That's the reconciliation between transcendence and immanence for Hegel. In tracing radical theology's materialist roots to Hegel in this way, I'm making use of a distinction drawn by philosopher John Caputo between a form of postmodern theology that descends from Hegel, which I've just been talking about, and a postmodern theology that descends from Kant. Now, Kant famously sought to establish the limits of knowledge so that he could make room for faith. So a Kantian postmodern theology kind of incorporates the critique of modern rationality, modern reason, modernist knowledge, only to the extent that it's treated as an exercise in humility. We believe as a matter of faith, not knowledge. We're not under the pretension that we are able to achieve metaphysical knowledge of God. We are not God. We confess our fallibility and our finitude. We are doubtful, we are tolerant of others. Ours is a generous orthodoxy. But we can make use of atheist critiques of religion insofar as they enable us to discover the God beyond religious idolatry and a faith beyond instrumental religion. But ultimately, we're able to keep our faith safe from the full force of these criticisms, because atheism too must be humbled. So Hegel also takes the world as a kind of horizon or limit of thought and knowledge, but he locates religion within the world and then proceeds to think God in space and time as well. So this is why he can be seen as kind of proposing the possibility of a form of theology that's beyond a kind of classical, metaphysical, two worlds, this world and the next kind of theology. That kind of a theology ultimately represses the material. Even though this is also the case that radical theologians like Caputo also see in Hegel's work just more metaphysics as well. So it's kind of going a little way with Hegel, not all the way with Hegel. So Freud classified as illusionary those beliefs that kind of centre around this consoling nucleus, this compensatory nucleus of a loving God, an afterlife of bliss, and a cosmic moral order. That kind of nucleus of those beliefs are found in modern Western monotheistic religion like Christianity. And he raises the question whether people would be able to do without the consolation of this religious illusion. He wrote, "By withdrawing their expectations from the other world and concentrating all their liberated energies into their life on earth, they will probably succeed in achieving a state of things in which life will become tolerable for everyone and civilization no longer oppressive to anyone." But whilst sort of accepting materialist critiques of religion's escapism, radical theologians question whether a reductionist understanding of what religion is prevents Freud from considering the ways in which religion might be taken in materialist rather than escapist directions. And this is where I see the work of Pete and George kind of fitting in this theological trajectory. Because after all, Marx said that the religion is not only an expression, but also a protest against real distress and real suffering. But he said this early in his career, and he never returned to this theme of religion as protest. He too had a restricted conception of religion as kind of static and unchanging, one thing, which sort of violates the original basis of the materialist critique of religion that begins with Hegel's locating of religion within history. So radicalising the materialist critique of religion by returning it to its Hegelian roots, in which religions are treated as imaginative figures and through which theology becomes an analysis of what's going on in these figures, radical theologians think religion otherwise. Okay, so everybody can wake up now. You. I'm going to talk for the rest of the time today, having kind of done a little bit of background there, about the possibility that stripping ourselves of these kind of illusionary and escapist dimensions of Christianity can radicalise our understanding of religion and enable us to glimpse this revolutionary materialist potential that might be there, namely by looking at whether religion can reconcile us to our nothingness rather than enable us to escape from it. So to begin with, and I think I'll say this twice, I want to suggest that the religious or escapist move is not that of recognising humanity's impotence in the face of the temporal and spatial vastness of the universe, but that of insisting on the wishful fantasy of humanity's importance. While the truly irreligious or materialist move is to hold to humanity's insignificance, to refuse to abdicate responsibility to a heavenly realm and to direct energy instead to the transformation of life on earth. So the religious or escapist move is not that of recognising humanity's impotence, but of insisting on its importance, whereas the irreligious or materialist move is to hold to humanity's insignificance, refusing to abdicate responsibility to a heavenly realm and directing our energies instead to the transformation of life on earth. Now we feel ourselves to be immersed in the kind of temporal infinity and spatial immensity of the universe. The life of our planet or of our species seems eternal in relation to our own lifespan. And we are so small, specks of stardust in the process of returning to stardust. But life is terminal. We are insignificant, unimportant, impotent, and impermanent. But such a nihilism of being nothing is not, however, without value. The transience of existence intensifies life. Here we are, but we might not be here for much longer, and we might just as easily never been at all. It's all a chance of life that we have life, and learning to live in the time before death should involve an appreciation of the time of life that has been given to us as a gift by life. Our being nothingness is a grace. It's not quite a saving one, since this is a nihilism that confesses that we cannot be saved from death, or kept safe from what Grace Jansen calls the death-dealing structures of life. So for Caputo, the value of our being nothingness is our being for nothingness. Meister Eckhart said that life lives without a reason why, because it lives for itself. Life is not for anything, it is for nothing. Why does life live? Because it lives. And it lives for itself, not because of something other than or external to life itself. Caputo explains that life is without why, without purpose, external to itself. Life is for free, not because it is without cost, but because it is free from any for, because it is for nothing else. It is an excess, a gratuity, a graciousness, a grace. Life is undermined from the moment it is subjected to the economy of a why beyond life. So life is for nothing, for no something else other than or transcendent to life. It is for nothing but itself. So I want to draw a connection here between this kind of an argument and the image that Pete gave us of a woman carrying fire around with her to burn down heaven and water with her to put out the fires of hell, because she wanted to live a life that was for nothing but life itself. So life is for nothing but itself. It's for nothing else than more life. But here I don't mean more life and no death, or more life in another world after death, but more life here and now before death. And not just more life for me, but for others. And that might mean laying down my life for theirs. And I don't mean more life at the expense of the quality of life, but more life as the intensification of life, as the most intense life possible. So if holding to our insignificance, our nothingness, is an irreligious move, then religion in this account of life as being and being for nothingness must be a strange, irreligious religion. It must be ir/religion. That looks better on paper than when I say it. A religion that's for nothing but life. So it's not a religion as religion for something. Religion is religion for something else, transcending life, another life in another world. Rather, it's an irreligious religion that understands itself to be but one of the figurative presentations of the states and the events that intensify our life. Religion provides narratives and images of the limit states of everyday life. Life, death, birth, old age, marriage, children, sickness, joy, health, sorrow, love, hate, poverty, and excess. For the radical theologian, what's going on in these figures of religion is an affirmation of life as being and being for nothingness. Life is for nothing more than the intensification of life. Here, religion is an affirmation of life beyond illusion, reconciles us to our nothingness, and thereby provides more than illusionary consolation. Life is terminal. Palliation is necessary. But religion is to be a real consolation, not an escape. It should return us to the earth, not enable us to fly off to heaven. For our religious traditions are about the desire to be with one another, eating together, walking together, talking together, questioning it with each other, and making it up together. Our religious traditions are also about hating each other, fearing each other, losing loved ones, and being crushed by life. But here religion is materialist rather than illusionary. It can reconcile us to our real conditions of nothingness without the escapism of conventional Christianity. For radical theologians, though often repressed by a religious escapism, this irreligious religion can already be found within the historical religions like Christianity, haunting them with the possibility of their materialist potential. But I want to turn to the work of Kester Bruin so that I can finish today by giving you an illustration of how church might also provide new forms of communal ritual that reconcile us to our nothingness and our being for nothing but life. So Kester draws a distinction between death and decay to suggest that it's perhaps not the nothingness of death that most of us fear, but the nothingness that's signalled by decay. So whereas the recently deceased body, or the embalmed body, or the preserved body is preserved, isn't in a state of decay, the decaying body is to be feared in particular because it's no longer fit for transport or use elsewhere. The dead body appears as though it might remain at least functional in another life, another world. But the decaying body is in the process of returning to this world. For Bruin, this means that the decaying body thereby tells us something about our place in the material cycle of things. We are not elevated. We are dust. We were dust and will be dust again. And it's the move from death to decay that's central to material processes. Death only becomes part of the cycle of life if it's followed by decay. So church should not form around the death of faith. After all, this is perhaps the crisis that's already happened back in the 19th century when belief in God became unbelievable, a crisis that has nonetheless been repressed. Instead, perhaps church should form around the recognition of this death, of this crisis, and a reconciliation of the decay of faith. This would not only be a way of experiencing the death of religious belief or religious identity, but also of participating in decay, in practices in which belief and identity are broken down in order for them to fund more life. This might be the role of the church, not only in the light of the death of God, but in the light of this dead God's decay. I'm sort of plugging Pete's new book here, but in there he is. In The Divine Magician, referencing Kester's work on death and decay, he says that the church can expose the decay of that which we probably already know is dead, but which we repress. Decay confronts us more fully with the reality of the death of God. So to give an example then of how church might reconcile us to death, decay, nothingness, and being for nothing else but life, I'm going to turn to the performance staged by Icon at the Greenbelt Festival last year. It was called The End. I'm going to read from the notes that I made after this event to finish off this talk. As we wait outside the venue, we are handed balloons and told, "This is your life, blow it up." As we enter, we are reminded of the uniqueness of such a life, as the number 1 is written in black marker pen on each of our inflated balloons. We are also handed a blank legacy card, which confronts us with the question, what do you want to leave behind when you are no longer here? Inside, we seat ourselves on the floor, amidst black blindfolds stenciled with large white letters that read, "The End." It is quite dark, with softly flickering images of a sacred heart projected onto screens around the room. But they are slowly revealed to be the sacred heart not of Our Lady Mary, but of our Lord Elvis Presley. In front of the stage, there is a table with a small plastic toilet on it. When Icon take to the stage, they are all wearing dark glasses and Elvis wigs. We are issued a solemn warning, which includes the caution that this gathering is brought to you by the letters D, E, A, T, and H. To blaring disco music, Icon move about the stage and into the audience, firing bubble guns. On screen, we are bombarded with a series of images that end with a toilet flushing. The music stops. Then the camera ascends a flight of stairs and we burst into a bathroom to find John dressed as Elvis on the toilet eating a burger. "Hello, Greenbelt," he says. "Welcome to Icon." At different points during this event, we are told how many words are left. From the opening, there are 2,326 more words, through to there are no more words in the end. And we are shown images of a bud flowering and transforming into a dandelion clock, of people aging, dying, and mourning loss, and of brain activity at the point of death. Throughout, Johnny periodically moves about the dimly lit room, removing the different props that have been in use or on display. Festival flags and glitter balls, the Roman numerals that make up the north, east, south and west of a clock face, the child's potty training toy, and shutting down projectors and other electronic equipment. He is letting us know that the event has been winding down from the very start. The end has been ending from the beginning. We are entreated to let the end begin, to give the end a beginning, to give it a birth in our minds by thinking about the legacy of our lives. As part of the liturgy, we respond to the question, "How will you live when you no longer live?" by singing along to a line from Aha's Take on Me. I'm not going to do it. "I'll be gone in a day or two." In a three-part spoken word piece, Shirley reflects on her last words, left to others via social media, the best ones set out like books about art on a coffee table. But she later worries that her words might get lost or misinterpreted. Would this mean she will disappear for good? Would it, she wonders, truly be the end of me? And she concludes by lamenting that her last words are out of her mouth, out of her mind, and she will not be around to claim or explain them. They are nothing. The ritual element of the end revolved around our own legacies. Having taken time to fill out our legacy cards, Kazi invites us to share them with the others in the room. But the response to each and every one of these legacies shared is the same. He says, "It seems to me you've lived your life like a candle in the wind." There's an amen from the rest of Icon and scattered laughter from around the room. Then, when all legacy cards have been passed to the front, they are unceremoniously dumped into the plastic toilet, met with pre-recorded phrases like, "Come back and try again." Towards the close of the end, we are asked to burst our balloons, to burst ourselves, to die in order to become part of a community of decay. The piece of prose in which this invitation is framed was written by Chris, a psychotherapist who is part of Icon. Pete's agreed to read it for us.
In a letter to his colleague, Lou Salome, Sigmund Freud wrote the following beguiling words. "When concluding an analysis, one must cast a beam of intense darkness so that something which has hitherto been obscured by the glare of the illumination can glitter all the more in the darkness. This evening is our attempt to cast an intense beam of darkness towards everything that has been glittering in our minds and hearts and beliefs, toward every light which has dulled our eyes, towards every belief which has turned us against ourselves, toward every truth which has made us feel bigger in the face of the enormity of uncertainty, toward everything that could take us away from our fragility. Because in our fragility, all we can be sure of is that one day, any day now, everything we hold precious will be gone. One day we will be gone. Nothing will remain. And for some of us here this evening, there are loved ones who have left us recently, or are in the process of leaving us, or it is us who are on our way. And in the face of this, is there anything to say? Is there anything we can say in the face of the end? Or maybe you think that icon, that all of us here are just playing with ideas in the face of what is the most serious and sensitive of things to people. That what we are all about in icon is shallow and disingenuous philosophizing. That the what is to come is so precious to people here that it should not be touched. It is all we have to stave off the darkness, to quell the fear. But in the face of a bright, shining truth, icon wants to offer a rumor of darkness. We are whispering it to you. In the face of belief, we want to offer some idle gossip, because something is being obscured by all the light. Something is being killed off by all the illumination. Something has trapped our hopes beyond the horizon and frozen us in place. The rumor we want to spread is about a community of decay, an invitation. Do you dare to take it up? My thought, not yours, maybe not, is this. When we begin, we will do anything not to face what is within us. The space, the gap, the lack. And we have filled our minds and the minds of others with fantasies, with theories wrought from the touch of our helpless flesh against the warm or cold skin of our mothers and the softness or harshness of her gaze. Of the feel of the wind and the sun and water and food and kisses and cuddles and bangs and crashes and sounds of voices and the rise and fall of our hunger and longing. All filtered through the desire and hope and love and hate of another human being, bound to us by blood and fear and hope and wishing. And somewhere in the muddle of hunger, desire, and fear, we fashioned a community of eternal life. No more lack, no more separation, no more pain. And it killed us all. It killed us all because it rendered us eternal infants, full of fantasy and unable to attend to the consequences of our powerful rages and hungers. Rendered us helpless in the face of our primitive God, who shouted and screamed and murdered people for touching his stuff and burned whole peoples to the ground to make room for the chosen few. But there is something else, something we can only catch from time to time. The community of decay. You shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. I am not washed in the blood of anybody. I will never be clean. I am part of the community of decay. I will face the God and gods I have made to stop myself looking deep inside, and I will drag my projections back into myself until I am broken again. I will give up my wholeness which is killing me and take my broken pieces and make what I can. And I will need your help. And your help will help and not help and help and not help. I will need you, and each time I try to do something with you, it will never be enough. But we will talk and agree and disagree and hope and even pray, and I will not try to stick with you, or I will try and stick with you if I can. In the community of decay, maybe we will not have to proclaim the life of God or even the death of God, but rather we will together purge the God we have made until all that is left is a wildness that cannot be tamed and cannot be named. And we will do it together because we are all going to die, and because we have language, words that can say we can lose ourselves, embrace our decay in order to find ourselves. I want to invite you to burst your balloon, burst yourself, and in the darkness, if you dare, reach out and hold the hand of the person who is on either side of you. You will never know them completely. They will not set you free. But this is what we have. The community of decay comes with no instructions. just paradoxes and complications, complexities and wonder. Make it up in the darkness. Make it up in the night. Make it up with us, and we will make it up with you.
In the final moments of the end, Podrick invites us to blindfold ourselves. God made everything out of nothing, he said, but the nothing was there first. Before the beginning, nobody said, "Let there be darkness," because it was already there. Cover your eyes. We put our blindfolds on. An icon burst the balloons covering a wooden crucifix, making us jump at the sound. Now Podrick tells us softly in the darkness, it is the end of icon, the end. And in the end, all you have is each other. Your eyes are covered. Take each other's hand, leave. Take each other's hand and leave. Your eyes are covered, all you have is each other. Take each other's hand and leave. This is the end. All you have is each other. Only a few very brave participants link arms and try to leave the venue blindfolded. Most remove their blindfolds before departing. Some of us stay to help gather burst balloons into bin liners. Icon have left the building. Thank you.
We've heard quite a lot about darkness over the last few hours and since last night, and I'm still waiting for resurrection. But with regards to what you just said there, within the established church, how would you think that what you've said could be, if at all, and you may think not at all, could be attached into existing liturgies? I'm just curious. You may not have any experience of existing liturgies, but, you know, because that icon service is what you can't be doing that every Sunday. I think it would probably screw everybody up completely. So do you have any thoughts or reflections on how something like that could be, this approach could be actually tied into an existing Christian structure?
Well, I think the thing with radical theology is it's already there. That's what radical theologians are saying. We're saying this darkness is already there. And Pete mentioned that churches don't tend to use the entire spectrum of the Psalms. It's all already there. So I think the resources for letting this kind of repressed darkness emerge within churches, they're already there. You don't need to be creating something new and amazing like icon gatherings sometimes are. You couldn't do this all the time, but the point is most of us don't want to do it any of the time. Most of us don't think we even have the need to do it any of the time.
I was really concerned about this business of no legacy and putting all the legacy cards down the toilet. The other evening I went to my Sea of Faith discussion group, and we had just lost very suddenly one of our members who happened to be a Buddhist. And we spent the evening sitting there, each reflecting and remembering the contribution that that person had made to ourselves and to society generally. And we all learned something about her influence. So she has left that legacy. And the fact that we were sitting in her Buddhist shrine, in her Buddhist garden, is another concrete legacy. And all the activities that will continue in that place for the future is her legacy. So how can that be insignificant?
I mean, I don't really have an answer to that. I don't really have an answer to that question, really. My comment would be that Icon staged that in order to provoke that kind of question. They actually did this gathering twice. The first time they did it was in Belfast, and then second again in Greenbelt, which they often do with their Greenbelt performances, are things that they've done previously in Belfast. this was the only thing that I'd been there for both versions of this event. The first one was very different to the second iteration of this event. The place was dark again, but all the imagery that we had were dead flowers, clocks on the wall. We heard a reworking of the Auden poem Stop the Clocks. There was a coffin. We processed up to pay our respects to the deceased, and inside the coffin was a mirror, so it reflected ourselves as the deceased. The second iteration took a very different tack. It was sort of looking at the same thing but through comedy. I personally felt that the first event missed me as a kind of transformative event because we do already know that we're going to die. And I was so confronted with this fact that it was, in a sense, just missing. I was just kind of going, yeah, of course, we're all going to die. Well, tell me, what's this doing to me? Tell me something new, kind of thing. Which sort of signals that I don't actually know that I'm going to die. I wasn't sort of existentially engaging with this thing, with what Icon were trying to confront me with. So when they staged it in Greenbelt and did it kind of through the lens of comedy, which it was kind of absurdist comedy, what was going on around us, it was actually easier to engage with this theme of the end of things, the end of us, and the question of what our legacy would be, because we kind of came at it sideways, at a side slant, which Pete was talking about earlier today. That's how singer-songwriters get us to engage with the sort of realities of our own suffering in existence and our awareness of death in a way that doesn't overwhelm us with it. So all of that's to sort of say that was staged, and it was staged in a comic way in order to get us to ask that kind of a question.
I'm fascinated by the scope of our imagination and what can be staged by people reenacting imagination. About 10 days ago, I took from within a room in church 15 people into the darkened church to see what they experienced, because we were examining poetry within the church. And it was really fascinating, because they were there for 2 or 3 minutes, well, no, probably more, up to 5 minutes. Then we came back into a room, and people said what they experienced. And it was incredibly creative. Not just because of the creative words, but the non-creative ones as well, by contrast with the creative ones. It was a nothingness, it was warm, it was cozy, it was beautiful, it was inspiring, it gave wonderful memories to them, it gave people terrible memories, etc., the scope. And then we took the exercise of going into the church, same church, in the light, and the different responses. And they were equally opposite to each other. Some were about wonderful brightness, some was, oh, no, too bright altogether. It was absolutely fascinating, the variation. I think that's about nothingness in a sense, because I think the whole word is questionable. What on earth we mean by nothingness? What we put into nothingness in imagination, in our philosophy. But in these two cases of darkness and light, certainly people putting into the darkness immense kind of imagination, which I think we would do.
I think for me that is what's so interesting about this notion of something being illuminated by darkness. That's really interesting to me. And the other response I have to what you've just said is this question of, is nothingness something? Do you see what I mean? Is nothingness a thing? Or is nothingness no thing? And how on earth are we going to be able to think that? That interests me.